My name is Beatrice Rose, and I'm 35 years old. The night my older sister fired me in front of 200 people, there was a jazz quartet playing something soft and expensive, and champagne was sweating in crystal flutes. On paper, it was her coronation. On paper, I was just the COO. On paper. Haley stood under the spotlight on the hotel ballroom stage, her hair perfect, dress perfect, smile perfect. The giant LED screen behind her flickered with our company logo and the words, "A New Era." Everyone turned their chairs toward her like flowers toward the sun. Nobody was looking at me, not yet. 2 hours earlier, I had been sitting in the back row, anonymous, in a black suit, watching waiters refill glasses and sales directors schmooze with clients. I'd built the numbers behind this party, down to the cost per champagne bottle, and still I sat closer to the emergency exit than the head table. That was always the deal. Haley took the spotlight, I took the spreadsheets. She was 3 years older, the charismatic firstborn, our dad's pride and joy. Haley could walk into a room and have the CFO laughing and the janitor telling her his life story within 10 minutes. She did sales, client dinners, press interviews. Her picture was on our website's About Us page. I worked in operations and finance. I rebuilt our supply chain when it was bleeding cash. I renegotiated vendor contracts. I was the one who found $12 million in wasted costs and quietly moved it back into profit. The year I did that, Haley got a plaque for Salesperson of the Year. I got a company mug. 3 years ago, Dad called a town hall and announced his retirement, effective after a transition period. He named Haley the next CEO. People cheered. Someone actually whistled. I clapped from the second row and pretended my chest didn't feel hollow. No one asked what I thought. A week before this inauguration party, Haley summoned me into her office, her new office. Dad's nameplate was already gone from the door, hers shone in brushed steel. She gestured to the chair. "Sit." I sat. "I'm making some changes when I take over," she said casually, like we were talking about office paint colors. "Big changes, restructuring leadership." I watched her fingers toy with a Mont Blanc pen Dad had given her. "Okay, you've been COO for what, 10 years? That's a long time, too long. I want my own team." There it was, not a conversation, a decision. "So," she continued, not quite looking at me, "I'm letting you go. I'll announce it at the inauguration on Friday. Clean slate, fresh start, new era. You understand?" I let the silence stretch until she shifted in her chair. "Okay," I said. Her eyes finally snapped to mine. "That's it? No argument?" "Nope." No one has ever looked more confused than my sister did in that moment. She thought I was rolling over, that I knew my place in her new regime, invisible, disposable, erased. She had no idea. Now, in the ballroom, the lights dimmed. A video montage played. Haley shaking hands with clients, Haley at trade shows, Haley laughing with Dad on a factory tour. 15 years of The Haley Show. Operations, finance, logistics, everything I'd built were a 5-second slide labeled Our Incredible Team. Then Haley stepped to the mic. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began. Her voice carried easily over the clink of glass and murmurs. "This is truly a dream come true." Polite applause, a few cheers. Our mother dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin. "I've spent 15 years learning this business from the best. My father, our amazing clients, and this extraordinary team." More applause. She soaked it in. She always did. Tonight, as I officially step into the role of CEO, I'm committed to taking Turner Manufacturing to new heights, to innovating, growing, building something even greater than what my father created. People were with her, nodding, smiling, believing. Then her tone shifted. "But to do that," she said, letting the pause hang heavy, "I have to make some difficult decisions." The room tightened, chairs creaked, glasses were set down. "I need a leadership team that's completely aligned with my vision for the future." She looked straight at me. "So effective immediately. I'm restructuring the C-suite." Her smile thinned. "My sister Beatrice has served as Chief Operating Officer for 10 years, and I'm grateful for her contributions." Past tense. Even in that moment, I noticed the verb. "But effective tonight, that role is being eliminated. Thank you for your service." You could have heard a piece of ice drop in a glass. 200 people turned to look at me, some with shock, some with pity, a few with satisfaction. People who'd spent years resenting how much influence I had over their projects from behind the scenes. Haley's grip tightened on the microphone. She expected me to bolt for the exit, cheeks burning, shoulders hunched. to take my public execution and vanish. I stood up slowly, every head turned to trace my path. I didn't walk toward the exit. I walked down the center aisle toward the front, heels tapping on marble, jazz music still trying to fill a silence it couldn't touch. Haley's smile faltered. Effective tonight. She started again, louder. I didn't stop at the stage. I didn't even look at her. I walked straight to the head table where my parents sat with my uncle and aunt. Mom's face was pale. Dad looked like he was physically holding his breath. I leaned between them, close enough that the microphone wouldn't catch my voice. "Tell the board of directors there's an emergency meeting in 3 hours," I murmured. "Conference room, mandatory attendance." Dad's eyes flew to mine, recognition, understanding, and underneath that, something like fear. "What?" Mom whispered. "What board meeting? Honey, what are you—" 3 hours, I repeated, 10:30 p.m. I straightened, turned, and finally looked at my sister. She was frozen on stage, microphone slack in her hand, the spotlight suddenly too bright. Phones were out now. I could see screens glowing, recording. "Emergency board meeting at 10:30 tonight," I said, my voice clear and even. "You should probably be there, Haley." Her laugh was brittle. "What are you talking about? I'm the CEO. The board oversees the CEO." "Exactly," I said. "Company bylaws, page 47. A ripple went through the room. Dad closed his eyes for a beat. "You can't just—" "You'd know that," I added, "if you'd read them." Her face flushed deep red. Behind us, someone turned the jazz music up too loud, too fast, as if that could paste over what was happening. "I'll see you all at 10:30, I said, and walked out of the ballroom at a calm, unhurried pace while the party disintegrated behind me. In the elevator, away from the stares and whispers, I finally let myself exhale. 8 years. I'd waited 8 years for the moment my sister would mistake the crown for the kingdom. What she didn't know, what no one outside that boardroom knew, was that I wasn't just the COO. I was a voting member of the board of directors. Had been since 2016, when I rebuilt our entire financial system and saved the company $12 million. Dad had appointed me. The vote had been unanimous. Haley had never once asked why I was in certain meetings, never wondered why major decisions waited for board approval. She assumed CEO meant ultimate power. It doesn't. I drove home, changed out of my suit, made coffee. I printed the relevant sections of the bylaws, not because I needed the refresher, I could have quoted them in my sleep, but because I wanted copies in front of every person at that table. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from employees, calls from my uncle, a voicemail from my mother pleading, "Please don't do this tonight." I ignored them all. At 10 p.m., I drove to the office. The building was mostly dark, the executive floor glowing like a ship at sea. I took the elevator up and walked to the conference room, turned on the lights, laid out folders at each seat. By 10:15, my uncle arrived. "Is this really necessary tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "She fired me in front of 200 people without checking if she legally could." He sighed and sat. 10:20. The 2 external board members arrived. Industry veterans who'd watched me quietly rebuild their investment. They nodded at me, took their folders, sat. 10:25, my mother slipped in, eyes rimmed red, saying nothing as she took a chair. 10:28, my father walked in, looked at me, then the table, then the empty chair at the far end. Resignation and respect fought in his expression. 10:30 on the dot, the door burst open. Haley strode in, still in her inauguration dress, eyeliner slightly smudged, hair beginning to fall from its perfect waves. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. I gestured to the empty chair. "Board meeting. Have a seat." "I don't understand what's happening." "Sit down." She looked around the table, Dad, Mom, Uncle, the 2 external members, then back at me. "Why are you running this meeting?" she asked. "Because I'm on the board," I said. "Have been for 8 years." She blinked, turned slowly to Dad. "What?" Dad's voice was quiet. "She's been a board member since 2016, Haley, when she restructured our finances." "And nobody told me?" "You never asked." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. I sat at the head of the table and opened my folder. "This emergency meeting," I said, "has been called to address your decision tonight to terminate the chief operating officer without board approval." "I don't need board approval to fire someone," she snapped. "Actually," I slid a document across the table. "You do. Company bylaws, page 47, section 12. All executive leadership changes at the C-suite level require majority board vote." She grabbed the paper, eyes scanning the text. As she read, the color drained from her face. "This says I can't make personnel changes," she breathed. You can make personnel changes, I said calmly, but firing a C-suite executive requires a board vote. That's insane. That's governance, not law, but corporate policy, which is legally binding. She looked around the table for help. No one met her eyes. So what? She demanded. You're going to block me from running my own company? It's not your company, I said evenly, but we'll get to that. I'm the CEO. Yes, and the board oversees the CEO. That's how this works. Her fist hit the table. Is there a motion on the floor? I cut in, voice steady. You wanted to fire the COO. That requires a vote, so let's vote. She stared at me. You're serious. Completely. I looked around the table. Motion. Terminate the chief operating officer, effective immediately. All in favor? Haley thrust her hand into the air. No one else moved. All opposed? I raised my hand. Dad followed. Mom, Uncle, the 2 external members. 5-1, I said. Motion fails. The COO position remains filled. The room was silent. Haley's hand dropped slowly back to the table. Meeting adjourned, I finished. Wait, she whispered. That's it? That's it? You're just blocking me. I'm following company policy, I said, which you would know if you'd spent the last 3 years learning how the business actually works instead of planning your inauguration party. The words hit her like a slap. She looked at Dad. You knew about this? He nodded, eyes tired. And you voted against me, your own daughter? I voted for what's best for the company, he said. That's my job as a board member. Haley stood so fast her chair tipped backward and crashed to the floor. This isn't over, she said, voice shaking. You have no idea what I'm capable of. She was right about one thing. I had no idea. Not yet. My phone rang at 6:30 the next morning. An unknown number. I answered anyway. Beatrice speaking. A man with a polished voice replied, Ms. Rose, this is Daniel Harrington from Harrington & Associates. I represent your sister. We need to discuss last night's board meeting. I sipped my coffee. There's nothing to discuss. The vote happened. It's binding. My client believes there were procedural irregularities. There weren't. The meeting was called It was called according to bylaws, I said, calm as stone. All board members were present. The vote was recorded. Your client lost. He paused. Ms. Rose, the CEO. Should read page 47. I hung up. 30 seconds later, Haley called directly. The moment I answered, she exploded. You can't do this to me. Good morning to you, too. I hired a lawyer. I noticed. He says I can challenge the vote. He says I have grounds. He's billing you to tell you what you want to hear. Her voice cracked. I'm the CEO of a $50 million company. Then act like it. Silence. A hard, brittle silence. Beatrice, how long have you been on the board? 8 years. 8 years? She sounded punched. And nobody told me? You never asked. She hung up. I expected more calls. Instead, I got a calendar invite. Emergency shareholder meeting. 2:00 p.m. Today. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then called Dad. He picked up immediately. You saw it. Yes, did you approve it? No, but any shareholder can call a meeting, even your sister. What does she think she's going to do? Dad exhaled the long, tired breath of a man who had been carrying 2 daughters and a company for decades. Come to the house, 1:00, he said. Before this gets any uglier, you need to see something. Dad's home office smelled like old books and cedar. He was seated at his desk when I walked in, papers spread in uneven stacks. Mom hovered anxiously in the doorway, wringing her hands. She's been calling us all morning, Mom said, screaming, crying, demanding explanations. I've never heard her like this. She fired me in front of 200 people, I said softly. She's not used to consequences. Mom flinched, but Dad simply gestured for me to sit. He pushed a folder toward me. Open it. I did. What stared back at me made my heart stop. Share distribution. Dad, 40%. Mom, 20%. Me, 25%. Uncle, 10%. Haley, 5%. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I own 25%, I whispered. Dad nodded, and she owns 5. How, when, why? Dad leaned back in his chair. Every time you accomplished something that fundamentally improved the company, when you rebuilt operations, saved us millions, secured critical contracts, I transferred shares to you, 1 to 3% at a time, over the last 10 years. I swallowed. Does she know? She knows she has shares, but she never asked how many. The only time I mentioned ownership was years ago, when I named her CEO. She said, "That's great, Dad," and changed the subject. Mom sat on the edge of the desk. Sweetheart, this wasn't meant as favoritism. It was responsibility. You carried the backbone of this company. I shook my head slowly. She's going to think you love me more. Dad's face tightened with something like pain. Shares don't measure love, they measure contribution. She wanted the spotlight. You wanted stability. You gave stability. I closed the folder. She's going to lose her mind, I murmured. Dad exhaled. We'll find out at 2:00. The shareholder meeting took place in the larger conference room, the one with the long glass wall overlooking the manufacturing floor. Below us, dozens of employees moved machinery, packed shipments, kept the company alive. Haley sat at the head of the table. Her lawyer sat beside her like a shadow. Dad, Mom, Uncle, and I took our seats. Haley didn't look at me, not once. She opened with a tight, rehearsed speech about irregular governance practices and inappropriate overreach of board authority. Dad interrupted gently. Before we discuss grievances, we need to establish voting power. Haley, you haven't reviewed the latest equity distribution, have you? She frowned. What are you talking about? Dad slid the folder toward her. She opened it. Her face went pale, then red, then something worse, something hollow. This says I own 5%. Correct, Dad said softly. And she, Haley jabbed a trembling finger at me, owns 25%? Correct. Haley stood abruptly, her chair screeching backward. How is that fair? I've worked here 15 years. So has she, Dad said. I am the CEO. I gave you a title, Haley, Dad said. I gave her equity. Haley's voice broke. So she gets the company, and I get the dress and the party? No one said that, I said quietly. Her head snapped toward me. Don't you dare speak. Mom flinched again. Dad's voice hardened. Haley Rose Turner, sit down. She sank into the chair as if her strings had been cut. Her lawyer cleared her throat. We may need a moment to review these figures. Dad shook his head. All 5 shareholders are in this room. That's all that matters. Haley stared down at the document, hands shaking. 5%, 5. You gave her 5 times more than me. I gave her what she earned, Dad said, and I gave you the opportunity to earn the rest. Her eyes glistened with angry tears. This isn't a company. It's punishment for not being her. The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt something twist inside me. Guilt? Sadness? Or simply the knowledge that the wound between us had never been about business. It had always been about being 2 daughters raised in one spotlight. Dad's voice softened. Haley, you've contributed immensely, but contribution is not the same for everyone. Your sister built the foundation under your feet. Haley looked at me then, finally looked at me. Not with hatred, with betrayal. You knew, she whispered. I didn't know the numbers, I said truthfully. Not until an hour ago. But you knew you had more than me. I suspected, I admitted. And you didn't tell me? Her voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have listened? She looked away. The meeting ended without a vote. There was nothing to vote on. The bylaws were clear. The ownership was indisputable. But when the room emptied, Haley stayed seated, staring at the manufacturing floor through the glass. I approached slowly. Haley, this doesn't have to be a war. She didn't look at me. Then why does it feel like I just lost everything? I swallowed. You didn't lose anything. You just learned the truth. Titles aren't power. Equity is. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. I hate that you're right, she whispered. I don't want you to hate anything, I said softly. Least of all me. For a moment, I thought she might say something real, something vulnerable, something sisterly. But instead, she wiped her cheek, stood, and walked out of the room without another word. I watched her go, and I had no idea that this was only the beginning of how far she would fall. The call came 3 days after the shareholder meeting. I was reviewing quarterly forecasts when my phone buzzed with the name Marcus Chen, CEO of our largest client. 18% of our revenue depended on him. Never a social call. I answered immediately. Marcus? His voice was low, serious. Beatrice, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. A cold pinch tightened in my stomach. Of course. Is your company having leadership problems? There it was. What makes you ask? I said carefully. I got a call yesterday from someone claiming to be an industry analyst. His tone sharpened. They asked if I was concerned about instability in your executive team. Very specific questions. Too specific. My pulse rose. What kind of questions? About your sister, the CEO. About the inauguration. About a board meeting. He paused. Things I'm pretty sure weren't supposed to be public. My blood ran hot. Marcus, I said, I give you my word. I will handle this. I hope so. His voice was clipped. Because instability is contagious. I don't want to get caught in the fallout. After the call ended, another notification appeared. A link. Sent by Marcus. I tapped it open. A small but influential industry blog. Headline: Turmoil at Turner Manufacturing. Sources claim CEO and COO at war. My breath left my body. It detailed the inauguration sabotage, the emergency board meeting, tension between sisters, leadership fracture, company in crisis. Enough facts to be dangerous, enough poison to spread. Only one person could have leaked it. Haley. Before I even processed the betrayal, Dad called. You saw the article? His voice was gravel. Yes, it's her. I know. This could destroy us, B. Clients panic fast. Banks even faster. My throat tightened. So what do we do? We tell the truth, Dad said. All hands meeting tomorrow morning. The warehouse floor was packed. 230 employees, boots echoing on concrete, forklifts parked in silence. Dad stood at the front, no podium, no script. Haley hovered behind him, arms crossed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I stood off to the side, every eye flicking toward me, waiting. Dad began. You've all heard rumors, he said. Some of you may have read an article online. Employees shifted uneasily. Phones glowed as people recorded. There was a disagreement between leadership. It was handled poorly, he continued, his gaze falling briefly on Haley. But what is not acceptable is when internal conflicts are leaked outside this company. Whispers rippled like heat through the room. This business survives because we work as one family, and families solve problems inside, not in the press. Haley's jaw tightened. Dad raised the paper copy of the blog article. This came from someone inside, he said. Someone who chose personal hurt over the livelihood of the 230 people standing here. The room went still. Haley looked at the floor. Dad continued, voice steady but sharp. Here's what's happening. Your CEO, he nodded toward Haley, will continue leading sales, public relations, and client strategy. Your COO, he nodded toward me, will continue running operations, finance, and internal structure. People nodded. Some looked relieved. Some exchanged glances. So the rumors were true. And if my daughters cannot work together, Dad concluded, the board will make changes. This company is bigger than any one of us. He stepped back. Haley, he said quietly, do you want to say something? She hesitated. Then she stepped forward, hands shaking. I want to apologize, she began, voice trembling just enough that only the closest employees could hear. The inauguration was supposed to be a celebration. I made it about ego. She swallowed hard. And I'm learning, she said. Learning that being CEO doesn't mean having all the answers. It means working with people who do. She looked at me then. A small, brittle acknowledgement. That alone surprised the room. There was awkward applause, soft, scattered, but applause nonetheless. Afterward, people dispersed slowly, murmuring relief or confusion or quiet gossip. Dad found me outside in the hallway. Do you think she meant any of that? He asked. I watched Haley in the distance, her shoulders hunched as she spoke to a sales rep. No, I said, I think she's afraid. Dad sighed. Fear is a teacher. That evening, as I sat on my couch trying to unwind, my phone buzzed. Haley, can we talk? Just us? No dad, no lawyers. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, tomorrow, coffee shop on 5th, 7 a.m. She was already there when I arrived, 2 coffees on the table. 1 black, no sugar, my usual. I sat down without a word. She looked exhausted, eyes swollen, hair unstyled. She'd aged years in 3 days. Thanks for coming, she murmured. You leaked to the press, I said quietly. She flinched. I was angry. You put 230 jobs at risk. I wasn't thinking. You leaked to the press, I repeated, voice flat. Say it. She stared at her hands. I leaked to the press. Good, I said. Now we start from the truth. She let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry, she whispered. Are you sorry? I asked, or sorry you got caught? She looked up at me, eyes glistening. Both, she admitted. It was the first honest thing she'd said all week. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she spoke softly. Beatrice, why did Dad give you so much more? 25% versus my 5%. I sighed. It wasn't about love. It feels like it, she murmured. It was about contribution. I rebuilt the systems. I fixed the pipelines. I saved the company millions. And I didn't, she whispered. You contributed differently, I said, but you never touched the things that built equity. You touched the things that built image. A bitter laugh escaped her. So I'm the decoration. No, I said gently. You're the face, just not the backbone. She put her head in her hands. I've spent 15 years trying to be the favorite daughter, she choked out. And you spent 15 years being better. That's not fair, I said quietly. It's true. She looked at me, eyes red. So what now? We work together, I said. Professionally, even if we're not ready to be sisters. She nodded tearfully. Okay. We shook hands. A fragile truce. 6 months passed. Revenue up 11%. 2 major contracts signed. Employee retention at a record high. To everyone else, it looked like my sister and I had found peace. But there was a heaviness in her eyes. Something restless. Something that wasn't finished. And then it happened. An email. Mandatory shareholder meeting. Friday 2 p.m. Called by Haley Rose Turner. No agenda attached. A chill went down my spine. Haley wasn't done. Not even close. Friday at 2 p.m., the conference room felt colder than usual. Shareholder meetings are small, just 5 of us, but the air was loaded, tight, and charged with something I couldn't yet name. Haley sat at the head of the table, dressed sharply, makeup perfect, posture rigid, confidence manufactured like a weapon. Beside her sat a woman I didn't recognize. Silver hair, expensive suit, eyes like polished steel. Haley cleared her throat. "This is Rebecca Thornton," she announced. "Corporate governance specialist. She'll be advising me today." Dad's jaw tightened. "This is a shareholder meeting, not a courtroom." Rebecca smiled politely, almost kindly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Corporate governance is law, Mr. Turner. I'm here to ensure the process is followed correctly." Dad's expression darkened. Mom looked nervous. Uncle kept shifting in his chair. I simply watched. Haley folded her hands. They shook just slightly. "I called this meeting to address repeated violations of board authority," she began. "Specifically, actions taken without required shareholder approval." Rebecca slid a stack of documents down the table. Over the last 6 months, the board approved multiple expenditures exceeding the $500,000 cap allowed without shareholder consensus. I blinked. A cap? Dad turned slowly toward me. "Beatrice?" I picked up the documents. A $750,000 equipment lease. Several capital upgrades. All approved by the board, including me. Technicalities. Small print, no one ever thought to challenge. "We acted within policy," I said. Rebecca shook her head. "Policy allows board approval for expenses up to $500,000. Anything above must go to shareholders. These decisions violated governing rules." Haley leaned back triumphant, which means the board, her eyes locked on me, overreached its authority. My pulse tightened. She'd found a real crack. "What exactly do you want?" Dad asked. Haley inhaled sharply, steadying herself. "A vote," she said, "to restructure the board, expand it, increase oversight, add 2 new external advisors to ensure decisions aren't monopolized." I felt the threat immediately. These weren't neutral advisors. They were her allies, hand-picked, prepped. Stacking the board. Dad stiffened. "You mean advisors who vote the way you tell them?" Haley's face hardened. "I mean advisors who understand governance." "Let's call it what it is," I said softly. "You're trying to reclaim power you lost." Haley's eyes flashed. "I'm trying to prevent you from running the company like you own it." The room froze. Even she looked startled by the venom in her own voice. Rebecca smoothly interjected, "My client requests a vote. All in favor of adding 2 new advisors to the board?" Haley raised her hand instantly. Everyone looked to the 2 external members, seasoned industry investors, who had been on our board for years. They exchanged a glance. One raised his hand, then the other followed. My stomach lurched. 3 in favor. Rebecca looked at me. "Opposed?" I raised my hand. Dad raised his. Mom and Uncle looked too afraid to move. They weren't board members. They had no vote. Only shareholders would vote later. Rebecca nodded professionally. "Motion passes. The board will expand immediately. Oversight procedures will change effective today." Haley sat taller, victorious, and something feral flickered behind her smile. But she wasn't done. Rebecca tapped another document. "Next, my client calls for a vote regarding continued tenure of the current COO, Ms. Beatrice Rose, given the violations of authority." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Absolutely not. You don't get to weaponize technicalities." Haley's voice trembled. "She's been undermining me since day 1. "You fired her publicly," Dad snapped. "You gave her the company," Haley shot back. "You gave me a party." Her voice cracked, pain slipping through the anger. For a heartbeat, she wasn't a CEO attacking her COO. She was a daughter, wounded by a lifetime of invisible comparisons. Dad stood. "Enough," he said. "We're calling a vote of confidence." Rebecca blinked. "That's irregular." "It's happening," Dad said. "All shareholders will vote on whether Haley remains CEO and Beatrice remains COO." The room felt like a knife's edge. Dad continued, voice steady. All in favor of maintaining the current structure? I raised my hand without hesitation. Dad raised his. Uncle raised his after a moment of tortured thought. 3 votes. All opposed? Rebecca asked. Haley raised her hand instantly. Mom hesitated, then lifted hers with shaking fingers, her first vote ever against Dad. And the 2 external members raised theirs as well. 3 against. A tie. Rebecca's expression flickered with anticipation. In the event of a tie, she said, the largest shareholder breaks it. Everyone turned toward Dad. Haley's lips parted. Hope, fear, desperation. Dad looked at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then he said quietly, I vote to maintain the current structure. Haley's face shattered. No sound, just the breaking of something deep. Rebecca closed her files slowly, tight-lipped. The motion passed. Haley pushed her chair back so suddenly it screeched against the floor. You chose her, she whispered. You chose her over me. I chose the company, Dad said softly. And you have spent 6 months fighting instead of leading. She staggered backward. I quit. The words carved through the room like a blade. Dad froze. Haley, don't! I quit as CEO. I quit the board. I quit all of it. Her voice shook violently. Draw up the paperwork. I'm selling my 5%. I want out. She didn't wait for a response. She grabbed her purse, pushed through the doors, and vanished. Mom burst into tears. Uncle exhaled shakily. I felt numb. Dad sank into his chair like someone had taken his spine. I didn't want this, he whispered. I wanted both of you. But only the hum of the manufacturing floor answered him. 3 weeks later, her lawyer called. My client has accepted an offer. $4.2 million for her shares. Who's buying? I asked. I'm not at liberty to say, but I found out 2 months later. Press announcement. Haley had taken her money and opened a competing company. Rose Innovations. She hired 3 of our salespeople, poached vendors, marketed herself as the modern alternative to her father's legacy machine. Some clients were curious. A few took meetings. But when they asked who handled operations, strategies, financial models, the answers were thin. Haley was brilliant at visibility. But running a company requires more than being seen. It requires knowing how to keep it standing. By month 6, she'd burned through half her capital. By month 9, she was quietly asking former colleagues about collaboration opportunities. By month 12, the company folded, bankruptcy filed, assets liquidated. And my sister disappeared. Mom sent updates sometimes. She's working for a competitor in Chicago, she whispered once. She's different now. Quieter. I never asked for details. Some things you don't need to know to feel. 2 years later, I sat in my father's old office, my name now on the door. CEO. Beatrice Rose. I never wanted the title. I wanted the stability, the structure, the systems. But sometimes the job finds the person, not the other way around. The company thrived. Revenue up 43%. Retention at 97%. 3 industry awards. And yet, sometimes when the lights are low and the office is quiet, I remember the night Haley fired me in front of 200 people. How she mistook the crown for the kingdom. How she never understood what real power looks like. It isn't the spotlight. It isn't applause. It isn't a title. It's the invisible work that keeps everything else from falling apart. I built that. Brick by brick. Decision by decision. Quietly. And she learned the hardest way possible. Some crowns aren't won. They're earned. And some battles don't make you victorious. They make you alone.